Woo! Yeah!
I'm gonna try to make this quick, because there's barely any information about this yet. And despite me being known to go on tangents to the point that people either don't want to talk to me because I have differing opinions, or that I somehow triumph over them, unlike podcasts that do literally the same thing, I'm going to try and not go on a super tangent, but I can't promise that I'll do this in the near future if Sega somehow fucks this up. What's up, everybody? This is Escape Room. Fuck it. Sonic Origins Plus. What the actual fuck? And I thought that Sonic Mania Plus was already pointless. But given that it's the one fan game that is technically part of Sega's creation, just like how Streets of Rage 4 should be viewed in the same lens, this is even more disgraceful than the time that Sonic Station brought up the coronavirus and the Russian-Ukraine war as a reason why this shit couldn't be better, made by fans, for fans.
We are living some complicated times nowadays. We came out from a pandemic situation, we have war in some places in the world, and all those impact things.
Yeah, I'm not kidding, he actually said that, and why do people take him seriously? Whatever. What is the point of Sonic Origins Plus? Weren't fans fucked enough already? Especially with the bipolar release cycle of Sonic Frontiers. Like, it went from people being mad at Sega, then it went from people being excited for Frontiers, and then a popular influencer made a video about it, particularly Donkey. And if people can't even form their own, or get misinformed, whichever one it is, I don't want anything to do with that shit. My 10 Things series videos that I make, or the few that I've done on DeviantArt with Mafia 2 and Super Mario 64, come from my own experience, unless explicitly stated otherwise. Particularly with the likes of RE4, which I had for the longest time. And even after having played it, thanks to a good friend of mine in real life, who I do know, and has been playing the game since he has his own Xbox, I've been somewhat persuaded into playing the game, but I still don't like the game, because it's just not a good game. I don't care if it was revolutionary. There are a lot of great games that are considered to be classics, but haven't aged particularly well, and yet you can't say that about RE4, which is retarded. But let's get back to Sonic Origins, because I don't want to derail this shit harder than a mayonnaise dripping over Doom Eternal again. What is the point of Sonic Origins Plus? Didn't Sega fuck over the fans already as it is? Making this shit digital only, overpriced as fuck, barely any games to celebrate the legacy of Sonic the Hedgehog made by one Yuji Naka, and even that lady who actually did make a good chunk of Sega games, may she rest in peace, and I still stand by that, even in my tangent about Streets of Rage 3, despite it being included in the Genesis Mini 2, I still say that shit is incredibly stupid, because, you know, you can just not include that version if you're gonna half-ass it, honestly. I'm not gonna get into the whole thing about emulating the games or whatever, because there's so many fucking compilations out there that are endorsed by Sega, so you might as well consider it emulation at this point. Does anyone remember the Sonic & Knuckles collection on PC, which had the bastardized music that had to be replaced because of legal reasons? I stand by that too. I don't care that the music got replaced, and I don't care that the music sucks. I wish it was better, but it kind of makes sense, you know. There are things in games that... You know what? Fuck it. There are other Sega games that had this exact same thing done. Look at Crazy Taxi. That game had a bunch of licensed music by a band, whose name I can't remember right now. That soundtrack alone made Crazy Taxi great. Again. All the licensed fast food restaurants like KFC. And the fact that people complain about this shit because it got removed and the new soundtrack sucks, get over it. The game is mostly playable, it's just there had to be a couple musical changes. What the fuck? It's like playing Tekken with the arranged soundtrack versus the original. Yeah, I don't like the arranged soundtrack to Tekken. I'd much rather listen, if the option exists, to play Tekken Tag Tournament with the arcade soundtrack compared to the console soundtrack, but it doesn't mean the game's a piece of shit. Even something like Tekken Hybrid not having the one-on-one mode that was on the PS2 version, it doesn't mean the game's a piece of shit. Sonic Origins is made by fans who grew up with Sega games so that new generations of Sonic fans who've seen the movies and think they're hot shit, when they are shit, I'm sorry, they're not the greatest thing ever. So that they can play and experience it, but this shit, especially what Sega has done, and how it was released in this state, it's just terrible. How the fuck is Sonic Origins Plus gonna make things any better? Honestly. What is it gonna include? Fixes for this shit? Making the retarded DLC on disc and have to pay like $5 for animated menus? This is what people defend, ladies and gentlemen. Because, you know, there's never been DLC ever that adds in a stupid cosmetic change. I know someone's gonna bring this up. I know that Sega kinda did this with Sonic Mega Collection, because there actually was a Mega Collection Plus. Except here's the difference. Sonic Mega Collection is just a package of emulated Sega games that were brought to the PS2 and GameCube. It might not be anything special now, but you have to remember, this was the PS2. Kinda like with Doom 3 on Xbox, the Limited Collector's Edition, and then later Resurrection of Evil, which had master levels, but we don't talk about that here on this channel. Sorry, that's a piece of shit version. The master levels anyway, and whatever. It was a legitimate way for people who either didn't get to play Sonic the Hedgehog in the Genesis, or not having the specs at the time to play the various compilations of Sonic on PC. Things are a lot different now compared to then. You didn't have people on their phones playing Sonic the Hedgehog. Legit, you would be surprised to find someone who had a Game Gear having Sonic the Hedgehog 3 would be more commonplace back then compared to what is widely available now. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. If you just want to play the games, I don't think emulation should really be that of a fucking bother to you. But hey, if you want to give the money to a second-hand seller, which none of the money's going to go to Sega, by the way, then you be my guest. You just don't come crying when prices of these things are going to start rising. I understand people not wanting to emulate things, but there's also a thing called compilations and other things. Even I knew that the Sega collections on PC, the Sega Smash Pack, were just a bunch of emulated Genesis games. But they're still the same games. They're just emulated. That's why they make it on compilations, so you don't have to just play it on the original hardware. I don't understand what people don't understand about this. Is it because you didn't buy it? There are emulators you have to buy if you want to get the full features for, so I don't really see the major difference between that. Something like My Boy or My Old Boy is like, what, $5 each? And you get the keys to the kingdom, literally. Or if you want to be big-brained about it, just get you a flash card, find a decent working Genesis console, and stop complaining. I don't know what the fuck people are going to be expecting whenever this new release is going to come out. I would actually be very surprised if this collection, and this is just my initial feelings on this, and I've said this in the other videos I've done about this, it would legit be a pipe dream if it contained every game from Sonic Mega Collection Plus and the Sonic Gems Collection. Combines those two games, lets you play each and every regional release of the game, and even letting you mix the soundtracks for Sonic CD, though it really wouldn't make that much of a difference anyway, unless you rather play the game completely in Japanese, but whatever. Again, something like Sega Vintage Collection Streets of Rage did exactly this, which is probably the best way to play Streets of Rage 2, since you get to see Mr. X smoking a joint, which is funny to me. And it even was recreated in Streets of Rage Remake. But remember, you can't judge fan-made games in the same quality as the real releases out there, but Streets of Rage 4 and Sonic Mania are perfectly fine though, even though they're not made by actual Sega developers, right? And I don't want to hear shit about Yuzo Koshiro either. He made like, what, 5 songs out of the 35 that are in there, and they're all terrible. I actually really like his music, and I love the Streets of Rage 3 soundtrack, more so than other people, but I'm not gonna pretend that his work in Streets of Rage 4 is the best shit ever. Yuzo Koshiro himself worked in the game, yet they couldn't get the rights to use his music that he made and could only afford the Genesis version of Streets of Rage 2 and the Game Gear version of Streets of Rage 1, and they couldn't even jumble around correctly? I don't think there's a mod that fixes this shit. Are you fucking kidding me? Just have the fucking boss music played during the boss fights and the final boss fight music played during the final boss fight. Shit makes no fucking sense, dude. Fucking sick of talking about that game. The game is fucking terrible. It's like Devil May Cry meets fucking retarded modern day character action games. Like Ultra Kill and Doom Eternal. Whatever, not getting to that. It's about Sonic, damn it. What exactly could Sega do to fix this shit? Having all the games from prior collections be in one collection? Having every Game Gear game in there? like they did with Sonic Adventure on the GameCube. They didn't have to, but they did. I don't think any of them are really that good, but at least it's an interesting way to play them if you want to emulate them. And even the ones on the collections, even something like Sonic Drift and Sonic Drift 2 have a built-in split-screen function, you know, basically emulating what Game Boy Advance probably won't do for the Nintendo Switch, where you can have two systems hooked up in a split screen so you can actually play the racing mode with your friend. And granted, it's not great, but at least it's a cool way and readily accessible way to play the old-ass Game Gear games that Sega made. It's still part of Sega's history, for sure, and they should be remembered, but they're not this diamond-in-the-rough game that's like the most greatest Game Gear game that's ever played. I'm not saying something like Sonic Labyrinth should be removed entirely from existence. It is part of Sega's history, but I'm not going to sit here and act like it was an underrated classic. Seriously, that game is actually terrible. But it's still a good way to play a game from Sega's history, and if you actually like it, then great, but don't act like it's the greatest thing ever. That's really all I ask, but people don't want to take it that way. They just want to take the first part of me saying, if you like it, great, but then they say you shouldn't mock others for letting people have fun. But God forbid you have anything to say about it. Seriously. It's just dumb. It is legitimately dumb. I have no idea what Sega's going to do for this Sonic Origins Plus.
I would want Sonic Origins to become like, let's say, Sonic Origins Plus, and have a DLC that would bring them, like in the future, with a physical release, and a book with all the artwork that is in the collection. I would love that, but...
Well, it's a good thing I didn't upload my initial videos talking about this topic, because otherwise I would have jumped the gun. That was a really shitty joke. And yeah, I said it. Anyway, let's talk about this one last time. So, what exactly is featured in Sonic Origins? You get Knuckles and Sonic CD, which you should have fucking been there to begin with. People have legitimately tried to defend this, saying that Knuckles wouldn't work in Sonic CD because he's not part of that core gameplay. Yet they added Tails, which is nowhere near the gameplay scope that is Sonic CD, unless you count that See You Next Game image. Sonic is Batman, the Dancing Metal Sonic, the Dr. Eggman and Sonic, and of course the Infinity is Fun crap. $40 for a initial collection that doesn't even have Knuckles and Sonic CD and this fucking bootleg menu? Are you kidding me? This is what the Sonic fandom gets pissed off at if you try to criticize it in any way. But remember, you have to criticize and explain why you don't like it besides, this sucks. Fuck you. This collection is also going to incorporate Amy in all 4 playable titles as well. From the original Sonic, to Sonic 2, to Sonic 3, and Sonic CD. This would be cool, except all those people who say that you can't incorporate ROM hacks into the debacle with talking about games like this. This is essentially a fucking ROM hack at this point. That's fucking funny. You can't use that to judge the game experience because it's not what Sega intended, except now they're doing that, but they're endorsing it and selling it to you for money. So that's okay. Fuck you. There's also supposed to be some Game Gear games on there, and they're not even including the Master System releases. Why did it take nearly a damn year for this shit to be as it's supposed to be, compared to the lackluster release that was Sonic Origins? You mean to tell me that the fans who made Sonic Origins for fans of Sonic did the same shit that a lot of fighting game companies get a lot of flack for by releasing a game as is, updating it with patches, and then a year or two later they just release it as a Game of the Year edition with a couple extra sprinkles of flavors just to ask people to buy it again. And especially for $40, again. This is almost like with what Capcom did with Marvel vs. Capcom 3, You know, that hot fighting game where half the roster from the original was just removed. Sorry, the Marvel's Capcom 2 specifically. Then they did a whole rebalance and re-release gimmick again, except, was it not even a year after? And I know someone's gonna say, oh, well, that's just for the retail release. You don't have to buy that if you don't want to. Remember when Sega endorsed a re-release of Sonic Mania? And I'm not just talking about Sonic Mania Plus. There are actually 2 versions of Sonic Mania that you can get. It would be one thing if you could select the versions of Sonic Mania where you get the really shitty Metal Sonic boss fight, and then the one that shoehorns in the Knuckles Chaotix fandom into the mix. But no, you literally get one release that has the DLC and one that doesn't. I would not be surprised if Sega did the same shit again, just to cash in on people who don't understand the difference between Sonic Origins and Sonic Origins Plus. Sega really is trying to be like Rockstar these days, I swear. If it weren't for the fandom, Sonic wouldn't even exist these days. Because people linger onto the one IP, and yet people will defend Sega this fucking hard. But yet even the Rockstar fandom has at least integrity to actually speak out against Rockstar's bullshit. Usually. There are still some people who are kind of mental nutcases, but at least a good chunk of them actually know what's going on. The Sega fandom, I think, is consistent of people whose mindset is nostalgia good, but don't criticize it, but you also need to explain why, besides, this game sucks. God. My whole point is that this should have been the main release to begin with. If it had Metal Sonic and Dr. Robotnik included, you know, it might be worth it since it would be pretty fun to be able to play as Dr. Robotnik like he's running away from Sonic and Sonic 2, and even Sonic 3 when he's boarding the best Death Egg Destroyer, whatever the hell that robot is called, I forget. Sega never fucking releases shit unless you go on the goddamn internet. Whatever. It actually would be worth the price, honestly, or even having a dual mode, or even having extra additions to Sonic 2's racing mode, or even having a way to reenact the Sonic CD boss race with Metal Sonic. That would be worth the $40 or whatever Sega wants to charge Highway Robbery with. But no, fans will just eat it up because it's Sonic. Fuck you if you criticize it, but you have to explain why it sucks. Well, I'm telling you why it sucks. The horrible coin system. God, why the fuck do they call it coins? This is the fucking retarded meme that people mix rings with coins, and yet the people who made this, because it's not like people can't play these Sonic games because Mud Limited lives and Mud Limited continues. Even though Sonic 3 fixed this problem with the snap of a finger and someone at Sega says, hey, let's add a battery backup option and a way to continue your progress. And even with the lock-on technology for Sonic and Knuckles with Sonic 3, it saves both your lives and continues. And if you happen to run out, you just get your 3 lives back. Maybe the only levels that might be a bit of a bitch are the levels in Sonic and Knuckles, which is why I say that that version alone is not good. Because it's essentially the second half of Sonic 3, which is much harder compared to the original version. Sandopolis is like one of the worst zones in the game. It takes too fucking long. And even trying to get the Doomsday Zone, the best level in the game, is just a pain in the ass. It really is. And you can't even play as Tails. Okay, I guess I won't be messing with that fucker. Fighting Dr. Robotnik and Marble Garden can fuck all kinds of off because fuck that fight as Tails. It's like one of the worst fights in the game is him. Anyway, I cannot possibly understand the justification for defending this, again, when it should have been the release that it should have been. Seriously, why do they keep doing this? And why do you have to pay money for it? Oh, because to make money. Wow. It's almost as if like this should have been the fucking release to begin with. Even something as disappointing as Mania is, it still felt like a complete package. 4 brand new levels on a brand new engine that just about nearly goddamn perfects the 2D Sonic gameplay that I love so much. Even having the option to use the insta-shield compared to the really shitty drop dash. Seriously, what the fuck is so good about the drop dash? I can never get used to it. And the only reason I say it's lackluster and disappointing is because 3/4 of the game is just the same shit from the 90s, from almost 30 years ago. And yeah, it's cool that they added a little bit, particularly in the Act 2 sections. But the Act 1 zones is just more or less the same except Goat Seed, and that's not exciting to me. If the game had, I don't know, more originality, I could probably warrant it. But no. Apparently there was some Sega head who said, Sonic Mania has to comprise these levels because people will lose interest, they have new levels. By this fucking mindset, every fucking sequel after Sonic 1 will have the exact same 6 zones, and no improvements are made whatsoever except for the graphics and the music. Seriously, what the actual fuck? And this isn't some Sonic Generations crap either. I don't want to hear that excuse anymore. I don't know why people are saying that Sonic Generations is overrated or whatever, when I just think that's absolute garbage. I just want to get this out of the way while I'm at it, because I know someone's gonna try to influence other people into saying that Sonic Generations was never good. It finally perfected the boost gameplay, which even when Sonic Forces tried to do this shit, it was so mundane to compare to Generations. You still had to try. You still had to keep your eyes on the prize and not worrying about some nonsense. They finally removed the stupid gimmick shit like the Sun and Moon medals, the Wisps, which really didn't add much. They're kind of like half-baked versions of the power-ups from Kid Chameleon, or, dare I say, the power-ups from Super Mario. I would argue that the classic Sonic formula isn't nowhere near as good as the 2D Sonics from the Genesis days, but it's still something just as appealing to those who just don't care for the boost gameplay. You gotta take the good with the bad. My only issue is that there's only one level from each. It would be really cool to have a 3-act system followed by a boss or something, but I digress. I still think it's a worthy package, and whether you play it on the console or the PC, it's a game that anyone can get into. The story isn't really the greatest bit, but the only thing in the game that really sucks is obviously the time meter and whatever shoehorn-in reason as to why they have classic Tails and classic Dr. Robotnik talking. It does make for some great banter, but that's about it. The gameplay is where it counts, and Sonic Generations definitely nails it in the gameplay department, even if there are some things there that I don't care for. But it's not enough to ruin the experience. And besides going for the Time Eater achievements, beating that fucker the first time does allow you to play as Super Sonic, which is a definite welcome back to paradise, especially since in Sonic Colors it was annoying to get, and Super Sonic hasn't been given the proper respect in my opinion. But remember, if you criticize these in any way, even if you write a 12 million page essay, you are either an autistic who doesn't have anything to do with the time, or you're just a fucking hater. And I can't stand people like that. You want people to explain why something sucks? Well, here's your answer. Stop fucking trying to white knight Sega when they do wrong. Sonic Origins should not have been released in the state that it was, and while it is nice that Sonic Origins Plus is going to fix some of the lacking gameplay features, it should have been there to begin with. I am almost convinced that this shit was drip-fed, which is immensely annoying, because Sonic Origins Plus is supposed to be the definitive way to play these classic titles, and yet it's either missing content, it's missing basic gameplay features, like having 16:9 gameplay with the proper gameplay instead of this fucking coins crap. Even with the boss rush mode, which is an idea clearly taken from a ROM hack, but remember, you can't use that to judge the game as a whole, unless it's okay with Sega and they make money from it. Piece of shit. And even that has both the limited lives and the unlimited lives, and yet it has proper gameplay aspect ratios, and yet the so-called classic mode is just a shitty 4x3 option, kind of like with Doom. And it's just the same as the 16:9 mode, except a really shitty border and the actual gameplay mechanics. If there was just a simple toggle or whatever, it wouldn't be that much of a bother. Hell, Sonic Mania did this shit. You could turn on or off the time limit, which is only really an issue on Titanic Monarch. Seriously the most disappointing level and finale to a game, but whatever. People who complain about the original Sonic games being too hard clearly has never played Dark Souls. Am I right? Okay, maybe it was a little bit of a low blow. I don't understand people who are going to possibly White Knight this time, because I've gotten quite a few comments from my last major video I did about this. Someone called me an Aspergerian rager who couldn't even spell Asperger's correctly. Some other people being nice about it, others being whatever, but seriously, how are people going to justify this time? I would love to know. Apparently this is supposed to come out in June or whatever, so this should have just been released this year instead of last year, making people fucking pay money for an incomplete project. It's supposed to be the definitive experience of Sonic the Hedgehog. This Sonic Origins Plus crap is so stupid, and I guarantee you Sega's going to milk you fucking numbnuts again. I think I'm done ranting for this topic. Alright, we don't have anything else to say. This is ScapeROMFiles, and I'll see you all next file. Thanks for watching, and take care. Gotta go fast!